because of that, it was overthrown in 1868 and Meiji Restoration happened in 1868. My name is Dr. Nuti Namita. I teach in Sri Venkateshwara College, University of Delhi. Now, in order to understand this topic, we have to go into the background, the political, social, and economic conditions of Japan in the 19th century. Japan was a feudal society, and the ruler of Japan in the 19th century was Tokugawa Shogunate. Shogunate was a hereditary military system, and it was the most powerful ruler in Japan. Tokugawa Shogunate was established in 1603 and it lasted till 1868. During Tokugawa Shogunate period, political order was characterized by peace and social order. However, by 19th century, new contradictions set in which led to the decline of the Tokugawas in 1868. This is the Edo. Edo is the capital of Japan at that time, and it was the political headquarters of the Tokugawa Shogunate. Although there was also another capital which was known as Kyoto, and it was in Kyoto that emperor resided, but emperor was just a figurehead. He did not have any power, and he was not allowed to leave his capital city and meet anyone. Now, as far as polities of Japan in the 19th century is concerned, it was divided into 265 Hans. Hans means provinces, and the central authority was, of course, in Edo, and it was the Tokugawa Shogun. Rest of the territories were divided amongst various feudal lords who were known as daimyos. There were two types of daimyos, feudai daimyos. Feudai daimyos were those who were loyal to the Tokugawas, and the tozamas. Tozamas were those who had fought against the Tokugawas at the Battle of Sekigahara. The feudai daimyos were the favored lot. They were given good land, they were given very fertile land, and they were also very close to Edo, the capital city. However, the Tozamas were given far away lands at the periphery of Japan. There were four main outside lords. They were the Satsuma, Choshu, Hizen, and Tosa. The Tokugawas had engineered a very, very ingenious system to keeping an eye on the daimyos. One of the most important system was the Sunkin Kotai system. It was a sort of a kind of a kidnapping sort of a system in which the daimyos had to permanently station their families in Edo, and the feudal lord who would live in his Han, that is his province, he would travel back and forth every alternate year to see his family. This meant that the families of the feudal lords were always under the control of the Tokugawa shogun. Consequently, what happened that it weakened the daimyos because the threat was removed first of all, and secondly, it was also a kind of a financial drain on the daimyos because constant traveling led to the improvements of roads leading to better internal trade. The second group is the samurais. These are the samurais. Samurais are also, of course, very high class in Japan, and they are the military group. They are the military guards of the shoguns, and they are supposed to protect the shoguns. They are supposed to be loyal and obedient to the shogun. They will sacrifice their lives in order to protect their lords, and they are characterized by carrying two swords and also they have a typical attire which they have to wear. So in Japan, they had a very, very formalized and rigid social order, and also it was very stratified. Every class was bound by strict rules and customs. It was known as Shino Kosho, meaning samurais, peasants, artisans, and merchants. Samurais, we have just seen how very high class it was, and they were supposed to be uh, saddled with all sorts of privileges. Peasants were the second class in hierarchy, and although they were very poor, however, they and socially they were quite high in the rank, because according to Confucian system, they were uh, they because they tilled and worked hard and tilled the soil, they provided food to everyone, they were considered as a higher class. The the lowest classes were the artisans and the merchants. The merchants were considered to be very cunning and crafty, and they were the ones who made a lot of money, and that is why they were considered as the lowest class. However, uh, economically, they were quite rich. They had amassed a lot of wealth. Economy, as you can see, economy was quite dynamic in Japan, and 17th century Japan had witnessed a tremendous economic activity fueled by population increase, growth of urbanization, growth of production, and increased internal commerce. Handicraft production had reached a pinnacle, and agricultural production had also increased. Um, there were several cities which had become very large. Most important amongst them was Edo, Kyoto, and Osaka. However, now we will come to the to discuss the internal crisis in 19th century Japan. What was the crisis in Japan which led to the downfall of the Tokugawa Shogunate? Because as we have seen, the Tokugawa Shogunate had established a very peaceful and stable order, and the economy was also growing. Society was stratified. There were no wars happening in Japan at this point of time. No external enemies also had come. But however, still there was a rot in the system. And what was that rot that led to the decline? Barrington Moore Jr., he blames twin features of peace and luxury. Peace permitted a commercial way of life to emerge, which eroded much of feudal edifice. Luxury led to an increase in expenditure for the daimyos, thus making them increasingly dependent upon the merchants for loans, etc. Samurais, they were the fighting class, isn't it? And their role in the society was to fight. However, because there were no wars happening, the samurais became unproductive. They became redundant, and because of the strict class stratification, they were not allowed to do any other work. So they were not allowed to go into agriculture or trade or any other thing, and they became a kind of a parasitic class. Most of them left the cadre of their lords and became wandering men, which was known as which were known as Ronin, and they committed all sorts of ill acts, and they became lumpen aristocracy, which was a source of violence and unrest in the society. Now, in the 19th century, we see a lot of fluid social mobility is there, because although it was a strict hierarchy, however rigid also to some extent, however we see that the blurring of class lines was happening in the 19th century. Some of the merchants were becoming aristocrats, some of the aristocrats were marrying into merchant families, etc. So these things were happily happening, and therefore the stability was disturbed. E.H. Norman, he blames increasing penetration of money economy. Of course, there were other reasons also like failures, natural disasters as well. Then, apart from the internal crisis, there is the external crisis, black ships arriving in Japan. The Western powers, they are also now eyeing Japan. They had conquered China by now, but they wanted to expand their wings and come to Japan as well. The most important amongst them were Britain and Russia, and of course, the Americans. It were the Americans who opened Japan. Uh, and Matthew Perry, as you know, he was first who signed a treaty with Japan. Then later on, uh, uh, some other people also, Townsend Harris, he signed the first unequal treaty with Japan in 1858. Now the economic impact of the opening of Japan was huge on Japan. It led to a kind of disruption in the monetary system. Money supply increased, causing sharp inflation. Impact on handicraft production was also there because more imported goods were arriving, which meant that the handicraft production was hit very badly. This led to violent protests and hostility against the Bakufu. Now, because of the conjunction of internal as well as external crisis in Japan, people were getting more and more against the Tokugawa Shogunate, and the slogan which was very much there was Sono Joi. Sono means revere the emperor and expel the barbarians, which means that the emperor who was cloistered in Kyoto and who was not very important at this time, the people were asking for his return as the most important ruler of Japan and to expel the barbarians, meaning expel the foreigners, overthrow the Tokugawa shogunate, and Meiji restoration happened in 1868. It was a momentous event, ended the dual role, which restored the power of the emperor as the ruler of Japan. History. Conclusion. The Tokugawa feudalism was abolished by the active coalition of anti Bakufu forces led by the lower samurai and several outside lords, and financially backed by the chonin. Chonins are the merchants. Even though the role of the peasants was not direct, but the frequent revolts did add to the general atmosphere of unrest. Bakufu was demoralized both in